So at Bound for Glory this past Saturday, at the end of the show, and everybody's been talking about this, so it's not really, somebody coming out and saying this for the first time. But basically, it was announced at the end of the show that Impact Wrestling is going to be going away. And in its place, starting with the Hard to Kill pay-per-view in January, in its place will be the return of TNA Wrestling. That's right, TNA is back. And they are basically promoting this in a huge way. They got a t-shirt out that says TNA, we're back. They had a cinematic reintroduction and reintroduction and stuff at the end of Bound for Glory. Like I said, they had Scott D'Amore answer some questions and everything in a Q&A this past yesterday, as well as Anthem Sports has come out and basically confirmed that not only are they changing back to TNA, but also that everything, along with it is going to go up in a big way for the company. And I mean things like, upgrading the production, sets, the overall production, presentation, the sets, the lighting, the ring, and even booking bigger venues. And although this all sounds great, the question is why? Well, as Anthem Sports put it in their press release, and Scott D'Amore said it, at the end of Bound for Glory, after the reintroduction of TNA, and it making its comeback, pretty much fans have been demanding. In fact, they said they went out and polled, that's P-O-O-L, polled, a lot of fans, and a lot of fans basically came out and said they preferred TNA over Impact. And even a lot of international partners like New Japan, AAA, some partners in the UK and whatnot, still refer to the company as TNA. So basically the overall consensus is TNA is the best, branding is the best way to go branding wise for the company. And then it's always been a more recognizable name. Whether you changed the name of the company to Impact, Global Force, you name it, people still looked at it as TNA Wrestling. In fact, some people would come on here on YouTube and in various podcasts, and they would, still refer to it as TNA Wrestling, period. We all know that in 2010, there were, it was still referred to as TNA, don't get me wrong, but it was being more promptly referred to as Impact Wrestling. It was still TNA Wrestling. It was still TNA Wrestling, but it was more from a branding perspective, known as Impact Wrestling. Basically it's like you go out and you say, okay, Monday Night Raw, for WWE, you just know it as Monday Night Raw, or Friday Night SmackDown, you just know it's Friday Night SmackDown, but that's a part of WWE, that in reality, the real name is WWE Monday Night Raw, WWE Friday Night SmackDown. The same thing with TNA, when they decided, courtesy of Mick Foley, on an episode of Impact, being the network representative, if you will, basically the same could be said with this change. Basically, it was TNA, but it was Impact Wrestling. It was TNA Impact Wrestling. That's what it was. It's just that the TNA was silent. And then, of course, they went full on with the transition into just, really referring to it as Impact, then GFW, then Impact again, and now here we are with TNA. Now, some people would say, well, why did they get away from TNA? What was the reasoning? Well, under the old regime, basically TNA was, it was kind of it basically, well, it didn't come without, it didn't exist without its controversies. We'll put it that way. A lot of things happened under its branding that really put a bad taste in everybody's mouth. Which is why, again, going back to 2010, even though it was still known as TNA, and you had champions that were referred to as TNA champions, the TNA was silent when it came to Impact, when it came to be just known as Impact Wrestling. And that was it. It was silent. Then again, you had the transition with GFW, then Anthem buying it, and so on. Now, the reason they changed originally was because of the controversy. There was a lot of controversy, surrounding TNA. Behind the scenes and on screen and so on. Originally, TNA, when people, I guess, did some research, they found out that the original reason for its name when the company started wasn't, for total nonstop action. No. Vince Russo has come out and said it. Saul Monster, when he talked about this on his podcast on Sunday, said it. And you can view that on a clip here. You can view that clip here on here on YouTube. But basically, the original reason for TNA being given its name back in 2002 wasn't because it was going to be NWA Total Nonstop Action, no, or NWA TNA, no. It was mainly supposed to be NWA Tits and Ass. That's what it was supposed to be, Tits and Ass Wrestling. But obviously they decided that wasn't good, and they went with Total Nonstop Action, which made more sense. It made more sense and it was more marketable. But again, that's one of the things that, has been associated with the company, and it's called, and helped kind of put the company name in a controversial, light that didn't favor it very well. So over time, like I said, and others have pointed this out, they went from TNA to just Impact, even though they were still TNA, to GFW, to just Impact Wrestling, and now back to TNA, because again, people still look at it as TNA. Partners, international partners like New Japan, AAA, and others, like I mentioned, still look at it and refer to it as TNA. Potential sponsors look at it and refer to it still as TNA. Fans, like who they polled and everything to find out what they would want, what they prefer from a name perspective, still look at it and prefer it as TNA. I mean, heck, plans were to bring it back, pre-COVID. I think that was the plan. The plan was to bring it back pre-COVID, which is why they had Moose resurrect the TNA World title. They were going to, potentially spin it off into its own separate show, if not its own brand, with starting with a pay-per-view that they had planned to take place at the Tennessee State Fairgrounds, which was once known as the Asylum, known as the TNA Asylum. It was going to be like a reunion of some of the original talent that they could get back, and that they maybe could spin off into their own show. But because COVID came around and shut the whole world down, those plans were scrapped. So the decision was, well, we're going to do this, TNA thing. We'll just rebrand the company if that's what people want. And apparently, that's what they want. That's what they want. So to me, I think it's honestly a good move because, you could call it Impact all you want. The thing is, we all still looked at it as TNA. We always did. We always still looked at it as TNA. Yes, they called themselves Impact from a company's perspective for branding reasons to try to rebuild and all that. GFW Impact to try to rebuild and all that. That's fine. But the truth is, no matter what coat of paint you put on it, blue, green, blue and white, green and blue, red and blue, whatever, white and red, whatever, we still looked at it as TNA. I still looked at it as TNA. I mean, basically, when they would have some of the shows like Slammiversary they had this year, people, people would still look at it as TNA. It wasn't going to, that was not going to change. I mean, you reference its past and all that, by referencing its past, what it was originally, called in when it started. The point is, no matter how you would look at the company, how you felt about the company, fans still refer to it as TNA Wrestling. And now it's officially, and now at the Hard to Kill pay-per-view in the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas, it's officially going to be a reality again. So once again, you're going to have 3, maybe 3.5 major promotions, on the North American side of things, running, that fans are very familiar with. Because back in 2002, it was WWE, and even though they were just starting out, they were making big names for themselves. It was WWE, and then here came the original Ring of Honor, and then here was TNA around the same time under the NWA banner as a territory, and then its own commodity. People will now be able to have that again, but now Ring of Honor is more like a secondary, half promotion, if you will, under AEW. So instead of having Ring of Honor fully there, you have AEW in its place. And now you're going to have WWE, AEW, and TNA. And that's something that a lot of fans are going to be glad to be associated or be glad to see because, Impact, look, again, Impact Wrestling, we always knew it was TNA. You just got rid of the name because of reasons, and that's understandable. But basically, we still looked at it as TNA. People that would talk about it, as I mentioned earlier, and even review the shows, would still refer to it as Total Nonstop Action, TNA. So, so now officially they won't have to refer to it as TNA, even though they know it's under a different name. They won't have to do that anymore. They will basically be able to call it TNA without saying, hey, I know it's actually Impact, but I still look at it as TNA. They will not have to do that anymore. Now they'll be able to just do it without incident, if you will. But yeah, TNA Wrestling is back, and I cannot wait to see what they do. The only negative thing about it, I think a lot of fans may not like, is we will not get the 6-sided ring. You heard me. The reports are the 6-sided ring, according to PW Insider, is not going to be part of the return of the TNA name, that the company was originally known for. The reason being is because a lot of wrestlers, past and present, some wrestlers that work for AEW now, some wrestlers that work for WWE now, a lot of them have come out and said that the 4-sided ring is a lot more safer on the bodies than the 6-sided ring. So because of that, we're not going to see the 6-sided ring anymore, unless they find a way scientifically to make it as comfortable as a 4-sided ring. Now, do I rule out the 6-sided ring making a return? No. I could see events like, let's say, Slammiversary being one of those events where for one night only, they bring the 6-sided ring back. I could see that. For Slammiversary, maybe Bound for Glory. So you might see it, in my opinion, not saying it will happen, but you might see it return at least maybe once or twice a year, mainly for the big pay-per-views, that being Slammiversary and Bound for Glory. But again, that's just my opinion on how I see the 6-sided ring being brought back if they do it. And if they do it, like I said, hopefully they'll figure out a way to make it as comfortable and safe as the 4-sided ring they're currently using right now. Now, the other question fans have is, well, what are they talking about bigger venues? They could barely, I mean, it's like, yes, they could sell out small venues like Cicero Stadium in Chicago, in St. Clair's College in Windsor, Ontario, but what are they talking about when it comes to bigger venues? Well, the Palms Casino Resort, where they're going to be having the show there, they're going to have the ring on a theater stage. It's from what I can tell. And the seating looks a lot bigger. Like, it's going to hold a lot more than what you would see, at St. Clair's College or even Cicero Stadium. Maybe not by much, but still, it's going to make it look very massively full. And I think that's just going to be the first step. I think that's going to be the first step in taking their time in booking the bigger venues. I think from a goal perspective, what they're looking at from, booking bigger venues is maybe getting into places that are more recognizable. Like maybe trying to book the arenas and venues that AEW is booking. You know, that way, that way they could try to get back on equal foot or try to get onto equal footing with AEW. So that way, WWE would have to look behind their back and be like, oh, we got not one but two major companies to look out for. You know, that might be what they're gonna try to aim for. Try to book bigger venues. Basically the same kind of venues that AEW is booking. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that. But I could see them if they come back to Chicago trying to book the Wintrust Arena, which is I think formerly the Now Arena. I could see them trying to do that. I could see them going to Rosenberg, Texas, where Dynamite was this past a week, and trying to book Impact Wrestling there, maybe a pay-per-view or Impact Plus event, there. I can see them doing that. And I think that's what they're talking about by bigger venues. They're probably taking note of what AEW is doing, by going to these smaller venues at times and on occasions going to bigger venues, every other week. But they're taking more of a notice of AEW going to places like Rosenberg and the outer region, the sub-region of Chicago where Wintrust is, and so on, and saying, hey, if we can book there, we'll be good. If we can book there, we could be good. So honestly, I see them doing that. I can even see them attempting, if they go to Chicago, not just to sell out the Wintrust Arena if they book it, because that's a bigger venue, but maybe even trying to get the All-State Arena, where Survivor Series is going to be, next month. I could see them trying to do that, because that's not WWE exclusive or anything. So I could see them booking those kind of places. Like the highest they will book, outside of, let's say, a Wintrust, venue, or a Palms Casino Resort, or Rosenberg, Texas, or whatever. I could see them. The highest I think they'll go is something like, let's say, the Allstate Arena in Chicago. That's the highest I think they'll go. I think they're gonna mainly look at all the venues, as I was mentioning. I think they're gonna look at all the venues that AEW is booking right now for Dynamite and for Collision and for Dynamite Rampage and Collision ROH. I can see them eyeing those kind of venues because they're smaller and they're more reasonable to have a potential sellout. I could see that. And you know what? What's crazy is I wouldn't put it past TNA, when they start doing that next year, to actually sell those out. Do what AEW is struggling to do right now. Can you imagine how Tony Khan is going to feel about that? Huh? Can you imagine? Here's a guy that did business with them because, it helps both companies get through the pandemic, survive and all that. But can you imagine how he'll feel if, suddenly, let's say 1 week he books Wintrust Arena in Chicago, or the Chicago region, doesn't sell it out, but then the following week, not Impact, but TNA sells it out with or without having someone like CM Punk on their roster. Can you imagine his reaction? You think he's gone ballistic already when it comes to WWE? He'll go even more ballistic if suddenly somebody, that's, or somebody, well, not somebody, but some company that he assumed was dead, the company name itself, TNA, suddenly rises from the ashes and sells out arenas his company can't. Can you imagine how he'll feel? He won't like that. He won't like that. But I would not put it past TNA to start doing that. I wouldn't. And what's going to happen if AEW doesn't get their act together is TNA, despite being on Access TV and, YouTube, membership club and whatever, TNA will slowly rise up and overtake AEW as number 2. Overall in North America as far as wrestling companies go. So AEW's got to get their act together. Tony Khan's got to get his act together to prevent that. But I can see that happening. I can see that happening not once, but several times throughout 2024. With TNA, I can see them booking these the same, if not similar, venues like AEW books for their shows, and and surprisingly and unfortunately for Tony Khan and AEW, drawing more of an attendance, for those shows than AEW Dynamite and Rampage and Collision, all together. So yeah, I can see them doing that. I can. But overall, outside of that, again, in closing, I like the idea. I like the fact that they're going back to a more recognizable name that people still associated with them, even though they changed their name to Impact, after Anthem bought it and everything. People still refer to them as TNA. So it's good that Anthem is noticing that, hey, fans want this, the partners want it, and overall it is better. And overall, enough time has passed for any controversy that was connected with those names, with that name of the company, to basically, cease to be, so to speak. But let me know what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on the fact that TNA, the TNA Wrestling brand, the company, Impact, is going back to being TNA? What are your thoughts on it? How do you feel? And what are your thoughts on them potentially maybe booking, larger arenas, basically the arenas and venues that AEW currently books? Let me know down below in the comments, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. And until then, guys, I will talk to y'all later.